Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who has recently subscribed to the channel. Thank you very much for your support. Avatar: The Way of Water opened this weekend, and it had what could be considered a fairly good opening weekend. But because of some comments made by the film's writer and producer James Cameron about a month ago, it's entirely possible that the film's break-even point is around $2 billion, which is incredibly large. And if we were to use the estimate of 2.5 times the production budget to estimate the film's break-even point, working backwards from $2 billion, that would be roughly $800 million for a production budget. However, I don't think that the 2.5 is accurate in this situation. It could be a much larger value, which would mean that the production budget is below that. But even the Variety article does not know exactly what the production budget for the film is. Still, the film did manage to earn $134 million domestically during the opening weekend, but it performed much better internationally, so that the global total for the opening weekend is $435 million. James Cameron's long-awaited sequel, Avatar: The Way of Water, collected $134 million in its North American box office debut, affirming the public's interest in Pandora and providing a needed boost to beleaguered movie theaters. Overseas, the sci-fi epic brought in $301 million, bringing its global tally to $435 million. Those ticket sales mark the third biggest global opening weekend during the COOF times, following Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, whose global opening weekend was around $442 million, and Spider-Man: No Way Home, which had a global opening weekend of around $600 million. At the domestic box office, Avatar 2 notched the fourth biggest opening weekend of the year. Now, I find this rather interesting because on a different website that I often use for this type of information, it clearly shows that Avatar: The Way of Water actually has the sixth highest opening weekend for 2022. So I'm not sure which site is actually the more accurate. So in spite of James Cameron's claim that the film needs $2 billion in order to break even, the film did not have the biggest domestic gross box office opening for 2022. But in spite of this, we have to bear in mind that James Cameron's films generally have much better drawing power at theaters than a lot of the other movies that have opened up. And as an example, we can explore how the original Avatar movie did back in 2009. When back then it earned around $2.9 billion globally, which was really, really good. And if we come down here and look at how much the gross domestic box office dropped from weekend to weekend, we can see quite clearly that during the second weekend, the box office only dropped by 2%. This was followed by the third weekend, which only saw a 9% drop. So if we then compare the drop from the first week to the eighth week, it's actually around 70%. Typical MCU films over the past year or so generally drop over 60% just from the first to second weekends. It's these very small drops from weekend to weekend for James Cameron's films that often allow them to earn the kind of money that they do, even when they don't have really big opening weekends. So now, with regards to Avatar: The Way of Water, the question that's on a lot of people's minds right now is whether or not the film will be able to reproduce similar staying power to the original film. If it does manage to have really good staying power like the original Avatar, then it could very easily reach its $2 billion break-even point. But if it doesn't have that kind of staying power, and the weekend-to-weekend drops in box office ticket sales are much larger, then its ability to reach that $2 billion break-even point is going to be a lot more difficult. But given that ticket prices are much higher today than they were back in 2009, that will probably work in favor of the film in terms of how much it actually earns at the box office. So we'll just have to wait and see whether or not the film can actually break even. Since this is opening weekend, it's far too early to tell that right now. Thanks for watching today. And a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to see more of our videos in the future and help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.